Man, the level of insanity coming from the other side is on another level. Yes, I'm going to be talking about these two, the usual suspects. Now, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Dr. Clone. He is widely known for trolling FBA spaces and lying about the history of hip hop. The other person you may not know. Her name is Adrena Costa. She is the person who feeds Cologne a lot of the nonsense and misinformation Cologne spews on his channel. Now, apparently, both of them hold the opinion that their iconic historical Puerto Rican figures are probably hidden in the archives of Black history, and that Black Americans, to some extent, may be to blame for this so-called cover-up and erasure. Now, you guys remember when I told you in a video or two ago that Dr. Cologne made a video that he literally accused Tyler Perry for hiding the fact that there were Latinas in the 6888. Now, once he realized he overstepped and was proven wrong, he apologized and took that video down. So this is a pattern. Now, they want to paint this image that we are in some way sabotaging them. Their goal is also to have Black American music seen as just American music. By doing so, they will feel no obligation to acknowledge the creators of these genres. Now, before we go into this panel discussion that I'm going to show you that I got from Dr. Cologne's channel, I want you to listen to the doc. In his own words, he quotes this ethnomusicologist, and this so-called ethnomusicologists say that just because you don't hear Latin influence in Black American music doesn't mean that it isn't present. Now, again, suggesting that we are in some way hiding their influence. Now, after that, I'm going to play a segment of the panel discussion from Dr. Cologne's channel on how Black Americans are supposedly hiding their stars. They also will tackle a few other subjects along the way. I'll play a few clips, and then I will come back and forth with some commentary.
Let me read something. Let me read something. Because you segued into something before I lose my thought. There's a PhD. His name is Paul Austerlitz, and he's a professor in the Conservatory of Music and Africana Studies program at Gettysburg College. Mm-hmm. And he's an ethnomusicologist. And he wrote something very interesting that I want to read. This is an article called The Timeline of African American Music, and it's talking about the Latin influence in African American music. And he said something here. Watch this. He said, African American musicians began incorporating Afro-Caribbean and Latin elements so thoroughly that while the influences are clear, the results sometimes obscured the origins of the specific rhythms at play. I want to read that again because I don't think people are getting this. So when they talk about, well, James Brown, there ain't no Latin. Well, let me read that again, based around the James Brown comment. African American musicians began incorporating Afro-Caribbean and Latin elements so thoroughly that while the influences are clear, the results sometimes obscured the origins of the specific rhythms at play. So for instance, give it up, turn it loose, that comment could be applied right to that because nobody understood. It was so obscured, it was so hidden that you didn't think about, oh, wait a minute, this influence came from Afro-Caribbean and Latin people? Yes. And this is an ethnomusicologist who is saying this. This is the source.
And the point is,
if you look at it in that way, to, like, oh, y'all stick together and y'all do this. But the way that we do it, there's no rhetoric involved. We never say we're Puerto Rican supremacist. We never say that we're supreme over any other, ethnicities or anything like that. And that's also to help other Latinos because we also needed help too. while we were helping other people in New York, in the Bronx, we needed help too. And that was often overlooked. So we needed to create our own organizations. And my family, they came from Puerto Rico to the Bronx, both sides of my family, and part of Operation Bootstrap, and also in the war archives. They needed us to do agriculture and things like that. But circling around back to hip hop, the dress, everything, we're in it all the way since day one. Okay. So the same way, if they want to say that Puerto Ricans migrated to the Bronx, we were, the United States is not that very old, but we were needed to be in the Bronx. We were, they flew us down there however way you want, imported us, whatever. But also African Americans also migrated from the South too. And we were there since the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, people saying that we wore sandals, we wore this, we wore high waters and everything. Everybody was doing that too. It wasn't just us. It was a sign of the times. Whatever times that you were in is how you dressed. And people copied everybody. It's not just one group from another. Okay. So, and especially with the whole Avenue Peace meeting, that was in December of 1971, way before hip hop before hip hop was created. Who was Yellow Benji? He was Puerto Rican from the Ghetto Brothers. So that can't be deleted. But as far as the organizations and stuff, you can't find a group where we have condemned a lot of what the America or the United States, because again, that's a new concept. A lot of what they have here has been taken from the Caribbean. Don't forget that New Orleans and stuff was mandated, or Spanish and the French were in power. You got a lot of old Spanish buildings up in there. You can't erase any part of us. But we gave a lot of flavor to hip hop, the fashion and stuff like that. So we gave a lot of the African Americans, for an example. They want to say, what did y'all do? We marched with them too. We marched with them. We helped build.
No, not all African Americans. Not all. Just the FBA. Not all. But it's like they're forgetting that there were Puerto Ricans being lynched in the South also.
Exactly. That's another thing that. Yeah. Thank you. Is that Big Dog talking?
Yes.
Real quick, look. When you hear us speaking like this, and I'm gonna address. My screen is so small. The one that just spoke. I apologize. Jamel. Yes. Hello, Jamel. I understand where you're coming from, but we are defending ourselves. We didn't start this conversation itemizing things. This is in response to the itemization that the so-called FBA directs towards us. So for someone to say that and for us to be kept quiet and not to say our piece, that's not right. So we also have a right to defend ourselves. So when we defend ourselves, then it's called itemizing, and that's not fair.
Like myself debating 8 brothers on this whole hip hop thing. None of them born in New York, right? They didn't even know half the history between blacks and Puerto Ricans. Okay, except the person who ran the podcast. And I brought it down like this, right? Y'all could agree with me if y'all want. This is my opinion. This is how I feel about it, right? You have the Black Panthers, Young Lords, side by side, Rainbow Coalition, fighting for the same causes. Okay? It continued. Then, gangs, the gang era hit again in the late 80s, early 90s. That's gang politics. Take that out the equation. We really never had no problems with each other. This whole divisive talk, right, comes to the point where your closest ally, which is Puerto Ricans, out of Chicago, out of New York City, out of Jersey, Philly, Connecticut, you're causing a divisiveness that it's going to come to a point where Puerto Ricans are going to say you're on your own. Okay? Okay? Now you got the West Coast crews, you know, Venezuelans, Mexicans, everybody else. They don't understand that in certain aspects, Puerto Ricans do keep them at bay from doing stupid stuff, right? Which even the person who ran that podcast, he agreed to it. He was like, yo, if we lose Puerto Ricans on this, we don't have a middleman to stop any oncoming beef. If it was to come down into this racial war.
All right, this is what I'm going to try to do. There was a lot said, so I took some notes. So forgive me if I'm looking down. I don't want to really miss anything. So, but she tried to imply that Foundation of Black Americans are Black supremacists. Now, I never heard any of us say that we were better than any other race, but this is what jealousy and envy promotes. Then she went on to talk about that she basically tried to suggest that Puerto Ricans were in New York before Black Americans were. Because she said, well, we were there since the 1800s. And one of the notable Puerto Ricans that were there around the late 1800s was Arturo Schomburg. But if you check the census around 1910, you will find out that there were only nearly a little bit over 1,300 Puerto Ricans in the nation. And at the very same time, there were over 4 million Black Americans. So it's kind of crazy to suggest that you precede us, because she says that they were in New York before us. Okay? So let me prove her wrong. And listen, this is a product of our educational system. We've been taught to believe that the Great Migration was the main reason why Black Americans ended up in the North. And that is not true at all. So how many of you heard the expression, the land of the Blacks? All right, let me read something for you guys. And I found this out myself. I'm always learning like everybody else. So listen to this. The land of the Blacks was a settlement in New Amsterdam, New York, where Black people owned land, and it was one of the first free Black communities in the United States. The Dutch created the settlement the Dutch created the settlement during the Dutch wars with Native American tribes. The Dutch wanted to replace white settlers with Black people to create a buffer zone between the colony and tribes. The first land grants were given to members of the Black militia and their widows. The land of the Blacks included parts of modern-day Manhattan, including Greenwich Village, Little Italy, Chinatown, the Lower East Side, Soho, and Washington Square. The British took over New Netherlands from the Dutch, listen to this, in 1614. See how long we've been here? The British allowed Black residents to keep their land, but in 1712, the British passed a law that prevented Black landowners from passing their lands onto their children. And as a result, the village eventually disappeared. There are many examples in our history, and this is one of the reasons why Black people don't have generational wealth. White people don't want Black people to have any amount of success in this country, because then we could pass on our wealth to our future generations. So again, she was wrong. And listen, this is our educational system. We don't learn these things. And so, like I said, I'm always learning. We're always learning. So let me go on to the next thing. So we were here centuries before any Puerto Ricans. Let's get that history correct. All right. Now, let me see what else she wrote here. She said, she had the nerve to say, we got our fashions from each other. I'm a product of the 60s. And I remember quite clearly the way Puerto Ricans dressed and the way Black Americans dressed. It was a clear distinction. We didn't get anything from Puerto Ricans. So that is a blatant lie that we got certain styles from each other. That did not happen, at least when I was alive in the 60s and the 70s. That did not happen at all. Now, she talked about the Caribbean influence and talked about New Orleans and how there was a Caribbean influence and that affected probably our music. Well, I kind of think that the Caribbean influence in New Orleans is somewhat of a myth because when we think of Caribbean music, first thing we're going to think about are hand drumming. Have you ever noticed that the early jazz bands are absent of hand drumming? You ever notice that? Have you ever noticed that the early jazz bands don't even have guitars? If you want to associate guitars with Europe, with Spain or something, you don't see that in early jazz. They have other European instruments, but not related to Spain. So I'm going to do a video more in detail talking about that history because I think we tend to romanticize that history. And we always say, oh, jazz came from the Caribbean or jazz came from New Orleans. Some of it did. But keep in mind, let's be clear. When I don't want to go into a history lesson, but I feel like I have to do this to make it make sense. You'll hear defenders of Caribbean influence talk about New Orleans, right? But they never talk about that after the Louisiana Purchase, there was a domestic slave trade, meaning that there were slaves that were transported to places like Louisiana and Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma, right? They brought their cultures to New Orleans too. And this is probably the main reason why you don't see this element of hand percussions in early jazz, because those so-called Caribbean influence wasn't that powerful at that time. All you got to do is look at the early bands in New Orleans, and they're absent of the things you expect to see if it was truly a Caribbean influence. Okay, now she talks about, well, the other guy, his name is Big Dog, talk about Puerto Ricans were lynched in the South. I ask you, just Google that, and nothing will come up. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but let's not embellish it, because if you can't even Google it, that's a problem. Right? That's all I got to say. That is a big problem. You're gonna make a declaration like that, I should be able to Google it and find it. All right, let's see what this next one. Let's see what else she wrote. Oh, the allyship. This guy also talks about how we're going to be in jeopardy of losing our allyship with Puerto Ricans, as if Puerto Ricans were protecting us from the other Latino communities who want to do us harm. I never knew that existed. I mean, I never knew that the Puerto Ricans were so close to us that they would stand in the middle and prevent things from happening to us. But let me rest assured you that there is nothing that those groups can do that haven't already been done to our people in the past. Let me give you an example. You guys said you were here since the 1800s, and there's been this allyship. So let's start with this one. June 20th, 1894. Where were you? Monette, Missouri. Monette's black population was expelled after the lynching of a black man who apparently killed a white man during a fight. The Monette expulsion was the first of a number of violent expulsions in the southwestern Missouri between 1894 and 1906. Where were you, our Latino allies, in 1896 in Linton, Indiana? 300 black strikebreakers were expelled from coal mining towns of Linton after one of the strikebreakers shot a white boy. Eventually, blacks were banned from living in all of Greene County. Now, let's pick another one, 20th century. Let's go here. Where were you? April 16, 1903, Joplin, Missouri. White residents drove out Joplin's black residents following the lynching of a black transient for the murder of white policemen. Listen, there is so much that's happened to black folks in this country. My question: where were you? You were here since the 1800s. Where were you? If you were our allies, and if you were here in numbers, why weren't you helping protecting us? Just keeping it a buck.
Some of the things you said, like Latin jazz is an industry term. Okay, right? Now, coming from the islands, and I've done my heavy research on this. My family grew up with Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, and all of them. Because my father's he's a Claremont boy. My father's a Claremont boy from the 50s and 60s. It's what Puerto Ricans brought musically, like with the Harlem Hellfighters within the band. Okay, what they contributed. But there's also Puerto Ricans, dark-skinned Puerto Ricans that actually fought with Black Americans in the Harlem Hellfighters.
We're going to open it up for a discussion up here, but I have a question. In terms of the compositions that James Reeseur played with the band, were there compositions and things that reflected the Puerto Rican musical styles and things like this? How did it manifest itself in the band? And could you talk a little bit more about the 369th and where it's located?
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, first, I have to say I'm not a musician, so I'm not gonna try to break down any music. I'll let those guys break down the music in terms of like the habanera and ragtime and all that. They can break that down. But the Puerto Rican musicians of that era were really well versed in Cuban music styles, because Cuba had been sending out on Teatro Bufo shows that played guarachas and all the stuff that we think of when we think of Afro-Cuban music today, guarachas and boleros and stuff. That had been coming over to the island. So Puerto Ricans were also well trained in that, well versed in that style of music. So they would play that type of music. But I must say that what we know as Puerto Rican music is not really seen in the music of the 369th at all.
Within the band, okay, what they contributed, but there's also Puerto Ricans, dark-skinned Puerto Ricans that actually fought with Black Americans in the Harlem Hellfighters.
No question.
Right? You can't negate all of that. What was happening was, because you had Puerto Ricans go to North Carolina to play jazz music, you had them come to New York, right? Now you're having an exchange, again, cultural exchange, on how people are playing their instruments. Right? So you have old-time jazz players, okay, well, let's start adding these percussions in, right, here on the mainland. And then you had those from the island saying, all right, we need to bring these horns in because the horns are making it louder, and bring it back to the islands. All right? Again, cultural exchange. Everybody, we exchange with each other.
Right.
Right? So this is what things were happening and things were doing. Nobody ever spoke about, oh, we created this or we created that. It's, we took some of this from y'all and y'all took some of this from us. We made this and boom, here it is.
That's hip hop, isn't it?
That's what it is.
What it is.
Okay, let's let Andrina get in. Let's let Andrina get in.
Definitely. I'm waiting for you. Adriana, Happy New Year.
Hello, Happy New Year to you too. Thank you so much. I agree with everything, absolutely, with the Harlem Hellfighters and everything, and stuff like that. And those are facts. We borrowed from each other. It's just now that we're having to defend ourselves. And I addressed the part about her dressing like a hick, how people are now wanting to assume that he's a hick, when back then that he was accepted, or not accepted, he was the father of creating the breaks. You know what I mean? So they didn't say anything then, but he's still a part of hip hop's foundation. Also wanted to mention the fact that, Puerto Ricans and Blacks, we stood together on the injustices. However, somehow all of the Puerto Rican contributions are being pushed to the side and they're being labeled as Black. So when you try to find our stuff in the history books, is really hard to find.
That's
It's being slipped into Black
that's something
history.
that my father has said. And my father's close to 80 years old. Said Puerto Ricans have done a lot, but we're not given the rights to it.
Yep, and you can hardly find it. What it is, it's so hard to find, and it's being slipped into Black history, or they say that it's almost like we're being exterminated. But when you go, like, in order to find stuff, you have to go into the African American stuff, like in the Black arts, stuff like that. That's a lot of us in there, and that's what a lot of other Boricuas don't know about. So when we keep hearing the same thing play over and over and over again, like a broken record, like for an example, when we didn't know that one of the lead singers is a Puerto Rican, which I bought out, you know how many Boricuas said, "Whoa, wait a minute, you kidding me? I heard this song all my life, and I'm just now finding out
You
that
talking
he's
to
a
teenagers?
Boricua." Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's Herman Santiago. He wrote the song. He was the original singer before Frankie Lyman came. And then they went to court, and the court, with all the documentation, said, it was Herman Santiago that wrote this song and was the original singer, but he lost the money out to appeals because of the statute of limitations.
You ever notice when Latinos want to take credit for our musical genres, they always talk about cultural exchanges. We learned something from you, you learned something from us. So therefore, you Black Americans, you really can't take total credit for your musical genius because, everybody influences everybody. So how can you say that your music is exclusively yours? This is the argument that they make when they want to strip the things that you created. They'll say, oh, we all contributed to it, so therefore you can't claim it. But you notice that is never applied to any other group of people. If the Irish create music, no one ever says, oh, you got that, it was cultural exchange. Or if the, let's take the Arabs create music. Oh, that's just their music. Even Latinos, when they create music, tell a Latino that salsa is not theirs and see what reaction you get. They ain't going for that cultural exchange, even though it is a cultural exchange because you know that, for example, if it were not for Latin jazz, there is no salsa. So we're right there. But they push back against that. Latinos don't want to be reminded that their music, salsa, that they love, is only made possible through the influence of Black Americans. That's a fact. But they will never, they are reluctant to admit it. All right? So let me see. Okay, now he talks about Herman Santiago briefly. Let me say something about Herman Santiago. No disrespect to Santiago. No disrespect whatsoever. But what I am going to say, and I think the evidence proves this, if it were not for the vocals of Frankie Lyman, no one would probably have heard of Herman Santiago. Let's keep it a buck. Because of Frankie Lyman, that's how we know about Herman Santiago. So, no disrespect, but let's not exaggerate, his importance to rock and roll music. Let's remember, this is another group of Latinos who was cosplaying a Black American art form, which was doo-wop. Latinos or Puerto Ricans have a history of cosplaying what we've done. It's nothing unusual what Herman Santiago did. Nothing unusual. All right, let me take this moment. I want to share this, guys. I want to share this with you guys. This is a clip I'm going to share with you from a good friend of mine. His YouTube channel is called The Boostetto. That's the, T-H-E, so you can look it up. The Boostetto, B-O-O-S-T-E-D-O. All right, I'm going to leave a link of the video in the description. So what he did several months ago, he did a roasting of Adriana Casa. when she was trying to say that one of the lead singers, Lucy Martin, she's an Afro-Puerto Rican, she tried to suggest that she was somehow the most important person in the group. As if, had it not been for Lucy Martin, Chic may not have been the vocal group that it was. All right, so I'm going to play a portion of it. He gave me permission to use it. So listen, go to his channel, subscribe to that brother. If you want to know anything, or if you want to see great video production, this guy's at the top of the list with that. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get it in.
Yes, what people are saying is black culture, or deeming as black culture, is really a conglomeration of different cultures, different inspirations.
Wow.
Okay, you're saying that it's a conglomeration. What is Puerto Rican music? What is Latino music? Is it a conglomeration, or it was not influenced by anybody? What is that?
My internet went out again. What did you say about Latino? What do you mean?
What is salsa?
Those specific songs with that percussion that made it, and those same songs were incorporated to what we know as hip hop, you know, the beats today and things like that. So,
I mean, one of the most famous, 1979 hits. We have a famous record that comes out, the Sugar Hill Gang, and they're playing to Good Times, and then we find out that one of the lead singers in Good Times is a Puerto Rican.
Yes.
Speak
This is
to her.
not a theme, okay? Now, I did bring that video out, and because, you keep hearing, oh, the Sugar Hill Gang, we didn't need any Puerto Ricans, we didn't need any Caribbean influence. As a matter of fact, the majority of that band, Chic, as we know it, is, Caribbean. So you have Good Times. You have one of the lead singers. And people want to bring forth, oh, well, Norma Jean Wright and this, that. But you know what? Her and Norma Jean Wright were in a band before they were with Chic. And to be quite honest with you, she was Lucy Martin. She was the main person. People loved her. You know what I mean? And she had the little rhythm and everything like that. But she's Boricua. She's very proud of her heritage. She is straight up Boricua. And mind you, in the intro of Good Times, when you hear the opening glissando, that's Rob Sabino. He's Boricua. He's a Puerto Rican. He's the one that created that.
It was at this moment that he knew. She fucked up.
Wait, it gets worse. She was Lucy Martin. She was the main person.
Bernard and I were smart enough to put the image of the black women up front. The image of the black women up front, even though it was our band, and we hired them. We got the deal on our own. People don't know that Luther Vandross was the guy who sang on all our records. Like every single record we put out up until Good Times, Luther did all of it. And
we would just sit and we would talk, and he was always teaching, always working on the vocal. And Fonzie and I were speaking, and we said that we all went to Luther Vandross University, because that's what it was like. Norma, I know you had the same experience.
So true, because had Luther not been with us when Chic was started, in reference to really kind of translating at times what Niall and Bernard wanted, because they were musicians, but he was the vocal guy. And we often say he was the architect of Chic's sound.
Vocal sound, absolutely.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's Luther. And then after he left, it was Fonzie Thornton. But
Good Times is centered around a classic dance party refrain sung by Fonzie Thornton, Alpha Anderson, and Michelle Cobbs. Good times, these are good times. Leave your cares behind.
so Luther would bring in the right vocalist, the right vocal session to do our records. So on some of our songs, we would have the two main girls in Chic sing those songs, but the singles were almost always exclusively done by Luther. And even though his crew would be on every record, his singers would sing the lead vocal too. That's why Chic is known for what we call gang vocals. We have a lot of people singing one song.
That's Luther, bringing us all together and making us gel as a unit.
And with the music, all I can say is I've been blessed. Now I know half your studio audience probably doesn't even know who the hell who I am and who they're listening to. So just to go back and give them a little bit of history, I started with the group. First it was Norma, then Alpha, Tony, and Nana. I went and auditioned. Norma brought me into the group. Norma brought me into the group. And at the time, Alpha, who was another one of my partners, was singing with Luther. And Luther at that time did all background sessions for all the majors. So she was involved from the beginning as well, but she wasn't part of the group. It wasn't until Norma left to do her own solo career, and the rest went on to be history.
So you're a liar.
Let Andrina speak. And
I just want to say something real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
The fact of the matter is that the corporate media did exclude Latinos. Okay?
That's not us, though. That's not us. That's the corporate. That's not us.
Listen, that's what I'm saying. I'm not blaming African Americans for that.
Or FBA.
Black American, FBA, I'll give you that respect. However you want to put it. That was the corporate media that did that.
Exactly.
If you didn't conform to their image of what they thought, you didn't get put on. Even if you was Black American and you didn't fit a certain image or you wasn't pushing a certain whatever, you didn't get put on. So there's a lot of people, if we were going to tell this whole story, there's a lot of people that don't get their credit, both Black, West Indian, and Latino.
Correct.
So that's what it is. So when you see those Puerto Ricans and they're talking about we left out, they're not lying. They're not blaming Black people for that.
They're blaming the industry.
They're blaming the industry.
They're blaming the industry.
They're blaming the industry. You understand?
Yeah, I understand. I definitely understand. Yeah.
Listen, guys. Listen. Hold on 1 second. Let me let Andrina go, and then I got 15 minutes because I got to do something at 5 o'clock. So I'm gonna give 15 minutes. All right, Andrina, go ahead, speak your piece, please.
Thank you. Rightfully so, should we be saying, where are the Puerto Ricans, or where is our credit? There's nothing wrong with that. The same way that our Black brothers and sisters do, correct? But when you look at music, you see our Black brothers and sisters. We have been, on purpose, deleted, erased, and hidden. And I stand by that. Because whenever I say something like that, receipts come later. For example, you had DJ Ivan Doc Rodriguez. I have a couple videos out on him. He commented on some of my videos. He asked to have his hands shown in a video because he is the mixer, the engineer, the producer. You know that he was denied. He was denied to have his hands shown because his hands were too light. So those are some of the secrets. Juan Tisol, a lot of his pictures were darkened on purpose. This is all documented. But it's okay for us to ask, where are our, where's our acknowledgement? Because just like DJ Charlie Chase, he's been pushed to the back of the room as a DJ. It's written in the book if you read it. So for some reason, Puerto Ricans have been erased, hidden, pushed to the side for some reason, okay? So it's okay for us to ask for our...
I like to build off on that.
Pardon?
I said I like to build off on that, what you just said.
Yes, and let me just also say that, boy, I was going to say something I forgot. It's okay to ask for our contributions. And also, even back then, we have been doing things together. And for some reason, it's always been pushed to the side. But as far as there goes my thought. As far as record label executives go, there's always been black executive label owners. You know, this thing when they say they don't know how to market Puerto Ricans, they don't know how to market Latinos. I call BS on that. You know why? Because we still had a stamp here in the radio. It shouldn't just be for hip hop. Okay. So I feel that it's not because they didn't know how to market us. It's because they didn't want to share the spotlight. See, this is stuff that people are afraid to talk about, and I just want to get right to it. I don't want to candy coat it. And it's not to be mean, it's to have the conversation. You know what I'm saying? So for me, you know, and I respect the question, Isaiah, that you say that, you know, I don't know why we're having this conversation now and this and that. You know, we don't try to be in the spotlight. We share and we contribute, and we're not known to go me, oh, look at me, look at I done this. But it's forcing us to have this conversation now, and it's being twisted and to say, oh, look at the Puerto Ricans, they want hip hop, because we never say that we created hip hop. Were we there? Yes. Did we contribute? Yes. Did we create? Yes. We did it all together at the same time, organically. So there was a lot of black label artists, or when they say, oh yeah, you know, the white man owns hip hop. No, they don't. It's anybody who wants that money, who's got the money. It's not just white people. Got to stop that. And no white Puerto Rican, no black Puerto Rican. It's Puerto Ricans, period.
Absolutely.
All right, let me let Dion go, and then I'm gonna
Let me provide some context to what you just heard. They were talking about the absence of Latinos or Puerto Ricans in this case in hip hop and why that is. Some people blame the record industry, and you heard the first guy speaking clearly blamed the record industry, but unsurprisingly, Adrena Casa said, no. I think Black Americans are largely responsible. And the gall to even suggest that we have a responsibility as Black people to make sure Puerto Ricans eat. We got to make sure we put them on. And then she accused us of we want to shine. We're not willing to share the spotlight. The audacity of this person. You know, make it on your own. Why you need us? This is what hip hop has been about. You guys clearly you're talking about you're not tethered. That's the very definition of tethered. That's the very definition. You want to be close to us so we can put you on. Put your own self on. Make your own record labels. It's ridiculous. She says, oh, well, the reason why they're not put on because Black people don't know how to market Latino. Are you kidding me? The Latino population is the biggest population in America. If it was up to Black people, we would definitely tap into that market. Because that means more money for us. Come on now. Maybe it's about talent. You ever thought about that? It could be about talent. I'm just saying. Instead of blaming us, let's stop the nonsense. I have some good news for the doc and all of his social media family. After careful and thorough excavation, I found some information that I'm sure you're going to be excited about. I discovered the true identities of 3 individuals who we were taught to believe were Black Americans. Now look how our educational system failed us. All this time, we thought her name was Rosa Parks. Actually, it was Rosa Perez. Not Rosie Perez, but Rosa Perez. Now here's another stunner. We thought his name was Frederick Douglass. We found out that his real name is Frederick Delgado. Now here's the kicker. MLK, Martin Luther King. Boy, we've been hoodwinked. His real name is Martin Luther Quinones. Now you guys can show your appreciation by hitting that Cash App. You're more than welcome. Now to all my subscribers and new listeners, thank you for all the support. Make sure you thumb up that video. please share, share, share. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. So until the next time, peace.
Dr. Patricia Bath is passionate about the treatment and prevention of blindness. Born on November 4th, 1942 to Rupert and Gladys Bath, Patricia had an interest in science and read constantly. Growing up in Harlem, New York, she faced sexism, racism, and relative poverty. At 16, she worked in the field of cancer research. There, she developed several theories about cancer growth rates that were included in a scientific research paper. She attended Howard Medical School and graduated with honors in 1968. From there, she returned to Harlem as an intern, and in 1969 accepted a fellowship in ophthalmology at Columbia University. Dr. Bath invented the cataract laser phaco probe, a device that was designed to use the power of laser to quickly and painlessly vaporize cataracts from patients' eyes. Did you know that Dr. Patricia Bath dared to dream and is the first African-American female doctor to receive a patent for a medical invention? Well, now you know.